At the end of this lesson, you will know how to make simple sentences. You will know the different parts of a sentence. You will be able to teach your students how to make simple sentences. What is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words which expresses a complete thought. Can you see the difference between complete and incomplete sentences? Incomplete sentences don't make sense. A sentence begins with a capital letter and it ends with a full stop, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. Now let's learn how to make sentences. We'll start with the simplest of sentences. Even though these are just two-word sentences, they make complete sense. The first word tells you who or what the sentence is about. These words are usually nouns or pronouns. We also call this part of the sentence the subject. Look at the first sentence. What are we talking about? Lions? Lions is the subject of this sentence. Can you find out the subjects in the other two sentences? In these simple sentences, the subject usually comes at the beginning of the sentence. The second part of the sentence tells us what the subject does. It's an action word or a verb. What do the lions do?
Roar.
What does he do? He laughs. What do birds do? Birds fly. Moving on to slightly longer sentences, let's look at this example. Can you find the subject? Who or what is the sentence about? The sentence is about Ali. What did Ali do? He kicked. Kicked is the verb or the action word. The third part of the sentence tells us what Ali kicked. He kicked the ball. This part is called the object. Now look at some more examples. What did I do? I cleaned. What did I clean? My room. What is the subject of the second sentence? That is, what are we talking about in this sentence? We are talking about the cats. The subject of this sentence is he. What did he do? Drove. What did he drive? The car. He drove the car. There is another way of dividing a sentence into its parts. These parts are called. We already know that the subject is who or what the sentence is about, and that usually it comes at the beginning of the sentence. But did you know that the subject can be more than one word? For example, most people are honest. In this sentence, most people is the subject. When we talk about the predicate, it is a part of the sentence that tells us what happens or what happened. There are many sentences in which there is no action. For example, I am hardworking. In this sentence, am hardworking is the predicate and I is the subject. In the first two sentences, the predicate tells us what the subject does. In the second two sentences, the predicate tells us what the subject is. My father is a doctor. His dog's name is Sinbad. For example, an eagle sits quietly in the tree. Read out the sentences to make sure they make sense and sound right. There are different ways to help students practice making sentences. The first thing to practice with your student is
sentences always start with a capital letter. There are two kinds of sentences: telling sentences, which tell us about someone or something, and asking sentences that ask a question. Telling sentences end with a full stop, and asking sentences end with a question mark. This is an asking sentence, and it ends with a question mark. Who can come make a question mark on the board?
Get two students to come up and make question marks on the board.
This is a telling sentence. We will use a full stop at the end.
Ask your class to give examples of telling sentences. You can give them 3 sentences, structure, options, and ask them to fill in the blanks with different words and say the full sentence out loud. Do the same with asking questions.
What is your name? What is your favorite color? Do you like bananas? Do you like pets? How many pencils do you have? How many sisters do you have?
Next, explain the idea of complete and incomplete sentences.
Is this a complete sentence?
No.
Good! It is not a complete sentence because it does not tell you what the name is. A sentence must be complete so that you can understand it.
Practice similar sentences with the class on the board. Write some sentences without the proper punctuation, such as questions without the question mark or sentences without a full stop, as well as incomplete sentences. Ask different students to correct the mistakes on the board in front of the class. In the beginning, provide a more structured approach to making sentences. You can start with fill in the blanks. Encourage students to write different answers. Clap for students who are creative and write their own answers. Ask students to come in front of the class and read out their sentences. Using the same sentence structure with different words will help strengthen the concept. You can line up 4 students first and then ask them each to add a different word in one of the sentences. Get students with different answers to speak up. Similarly, do the same kind of repetition with the rest of the sentences. Practice makes perfect. Explain the concept of writing basic sentences to your students. Use the subject, action, object, structure as explained earlier. Instead of using the word verb, use action because your students are familiar with it. Remember that it is not important for your students to memorize the words subject, action, and object. The idea is to simply give them an easy structure they can follow. Start with 2-word sentences. Get your class to give some examples. If they have trouble, then give them the subject first and ask them to give you actions. Then give them actions and ask them to put the subjects before the actions. Introduce the word subject once, but don't spend time getting your class to memorize it. Simply tell your students that this is what the sentence is about and that it is a naming word. This should come at the beginning of the sentence. Next, you can explain the subject, action, object, structure, and practice making sentences together. Once again, the idea is to help students understand how to make simple sentences. Introduce the words subject, action, object once, but then use easier words to explain the concept behind these words. One such exercise to practice this will be to make 5 flashcards of subjects, 5 of verbs, and 5 of objects. They should all be of different colors. Paste all the flashcards at the top of the board. The subject cards should be on the top line, then the action cards, and then the object cards, all in one line.
Okay, let's read all these cards first. Amal, we, I, monkeys, the girls, sings, play, climbed, like, eat, cricket, apples, my mother, the tree, a song. Now we will make sentences using one card from each section. You can choose any of the words, but make sure it makes sense. Who wants to choose the first word of the sentence?
I.
Great! I. What action word do you want to use? You can't use sings because the action word has an S, and when we use I, we don't add S to the action word.
Let the students choose any of the appropriate words like eat, play, climbed. If students choose a word that does not make sense or is incorrect grammatically, then briefly explain why they can't use that word. Remember that it's not a grammar lesson and focus on practicing sentence making.
Eat.
Okay, now what do you eat? Can you eat cricket?
No.
Can you eat the tree?
No.
Which word will you choose?
Apples.
Who can read the full sentence?
I eat apples.
Involve different students in this activity. Try and use the same flashcards in different sentence structures. Sometimes you can leave 2 of the flashcards on the board and ask the child to change the third one.
Let's change the subject.
The girls.
Great! Let's change it again.
We.
Ask students to make simple sentences like this. You can first provide them 2 parts of the sentence and ask them to just write one part. Then you can provide just one word and ask them to fill in 2 words. Once students understand how to make small sentences, get them to practice by answering questions. For example, if they have to write 3 sentences about their toy, you can give them 3 questions. Encourage children to write in full sentences. Provide help and translation where required. Provide some sentence structure if needed, or give them hints like the first sentence can start with mine. Try this fun game with your students to help them learn how to make sentences. Do the same with 4 more sentences. Taking the first set of cards, assign 1 square to 1 chart. So for the first example, you will have 7 students standing in front of the class, holding 1 square each. Ask the rest of the class to help these 7 students stand in the order in which their words together make a complete sentence. Make sure the class is familiar with the words on the cards. Read them out together if you think most students can't read the words.
We need our friends here to stand in a way that their words make a proper sentence. I think the first word of the sentence is Sarah. Who can guess what the next word should be?
Make sure the students answer one by one. Ask them to raise their hands and speak only when asked. After every attempt at rearrangement from the class, read out the sentence the way the students are standing.
Okay, now let's read the sentence. Sarah drinks in the morning milk. Does this sentence sound right? I don't think so. There seems to be one little problem with it. Who can tell me what?
Repeat the exercise with the other sentences as many times as you want.